Tensions are growing between the United States and Afghanistan, and new details on a U.S. soldier suspected of killing 16 Afghan civilians. Afghanistan's President Karzai accusing the United States of stonewalling an investigation into those deaths and also blasting our troops on the ground, demanding that U.S. troops be confined to major bases in Afghanistan by next year. How strained is the relationship between the United States and Afghanistan? Here now, Stephen Yates, former Deputy Assistant to the Vice President for National Security Affairs. Mr. Yates, always a pleasure to speak with you. Do you think it is understandable that American support for this war is hitting a new low?
I do. Thank you, Greg. I think it's an exceedingly important topic, and I think it's very reasonable that people would be frustrated. This is our longest foreign war. There is a profound lack of gratitude, seemingly, on the ground at Afghanistan for the troops are doing, and what President Karzai is saying is frankly insulting at times.
You believe, as I understand it, that the policies of this president, President Obama, have in some ways aggravated the conditions in Afghanistan. How so?
I do. I unfortunately think that there's been a profound lack of leadership on the president's part. Starting off in 2009, it took a desperately long time to decide where he wanted to go on strategy. In the meantime, personally and publicly insulting President Karzai, which unfortunately for him is the elected leader of Afghanistan, someone with whom we have to work. Also then launched a strategy known as the Surge, while at the same time emphasizing timetables for transition and withdrawal, which then leads others in the field, including President Karzai, to have to behave in ways to live in a post-U.S. environment, cutting deals with the devils they live with, rather than working as closely with us. I think we're still paying a price for some of those tactical decisions early on. To
be fair, you would admit, I would think, that the president was dealt a pretty difficult hand when he assumed office. It was a war that had largely been overshadowed by Iraq, both in personnel and perhaps military strategy. So it was difficult for him to step into that position.
Yeah, I would admit it's a difficult situation. It was a long war. It was, however, the war that he spoke for 2 full years as being the one that was justified, the one that was necessary. And what I think is really lost in all of the talk today is that the president has not really done very much to explain to Americans why we are there. And even if we have choices about how many troops are there and how they are used, there's an ongoing mission there. There is a hole in southern Manhattan as a result of actions that originated in Afghanistan. The need to keep the Taliban from power and al-Qaeda-like groups from reconstituting a base there remains, regardless of what our favor for Hamid Karzai might be or our stomach for troop levels. We also have a dangerous neighbor in Pakistan, and not least of which a dangerous neighbor in Iran. We have to contemplate what is the way forward with lower troops and assets in Afghanistan in dealing with those serious threats.
But I wonder if these recent ugly and volatile incidents underscore the notion that some have put forth, that the presence of American troops there are creating more problems than solutions.
Well, in the absence of any real education of the public of why we're there, I think it's going to be very difficult to sustain a troop presence, and they do become basically sitting targets.
Right.
A poll not very long ago in southern Afghanistan, however inaccurate it may be, suggested that only 8% of adult men in southern Afghanistan knew that 9/11 happened. If people don't have a sense of a war that was declared on us,
right,
what a pre-U.S. invasion, pre-Karzai administration Afghanistan looked like in terms of human rights and just the sheer ugliness and brutality of life at that time, how could they possibly support our presence?
Karzai is now demanding an early withdrawal of coalition troops. He claims his country's forces are ready to handle it. Would a U.S. withdrawal, such as he's talking about, allow the Taliban to simply reconstitute itself and thus permit terrorists to establish safe haven once again from which to operate?
I think there's a significant risk of that. I think that we have to look very, very seriously at the options of how we can recalibrate our troop presence. Certainly, this has been a long war, and our troops are fatigued, and we need to find ways to have a lighter footprint. But the security imperative that brought us there is not something that we chose. It was a mission that we were forced to have to face, and that will remain.
If we do what Karzai is asking, does that mean Afghanistan could arguably revert to pre-war conditions, meaning that Precious American lives, not to mention billions in taxpayer dollars, were largely wasted, and those lives were lost in vain.
Ultimately, I think that's what we absolutely have to avoid. There is a risk of a fallback should we just withdraw and let the chips fall where they may. I just don't think we can afford to do that. I think we owe it to the thousands of Americans who fought and sacrificed for a mission that was just, that made a meaningful difference,
right.
And that we're grateful for what they've done.
Karzai says his forces can handle the security of his nation. Is he mistaken, or could they?
Well, we have invested a decade in trying to increase those capabilities. I certainly would like to believe that they are improving. President Karzai is betting his own very life on the capabilities of those forces. I think that we can't afford to leave our own interests in the hands of any foreign power, including that of Afghanistan. But President Karzai's own livelihood, I think we can entrust to his own forces.
Stephen Yates, many thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Anytime.